Might end up making a bigger clip about this one. Because again, man, I really let's see if all our instruments are working here first before we get into the thick of it, huh? So we find ourselves in an interesting situation, don't we, chat? Where we can't really seem to get a handle on the division, the confusion, and how far we've sunk into. I don't really know what we even call this depravity. I don't,
How we
but
doing, King?
let's do this. Let's check out this clip and let's see what it has to say, what it has to argue. I'll give you like a quick description, I suppose. Um, the title says, and this is from Big Think on YouTube. The title says, and TikTok has been banning my streams for this, which is absurd because people do reactions all the
How we
time, but
doing,
whatever.
Didi?
Um, the title says the three elements of stupidity according to philosophy. And when they say stupidity, they mean it in the philosophical sense as to
How we doing,
say,
Andrew?
uh, sort of this lack of ability to engage. The reaction today is for a philosophy clip. It's not even a clip; it's a long video, and so might have to take it back on later. But um, it's called "The Three Elements of Stupidity According to Philosophy," and I think this is a salient discussion because we find ourselves in a moment where so much of our society is plagued with stupidity, and I think it's worth our time to try and wrap our minds around what this phenomenon is. And so I haven't watched the clip. I'm familiar with the concept of stupidity from a philosophical perspective, but I haven't seen this clip. So this will be the first time for
How we
me
doing,
and you,
Art?
chat. So let's do it. Switch our instruments here. I guess I'm gonna move this up to the bottom here and maybe increase the size of this. Suphalis.
IDK Broswatch says,
Uh,
how do you feel about Lenin?
do I feel about Lenin? I don't have any thoughts on Lenin. I know that he's considered one of the more revolutionary figures of sort of pre-Soviet Russia, at
How
least
we
to the
doing,
best of my
Dominican
knowledge,
Bomber?
which is very little. Um, but other than that, I don't really know anything else. Let me shrink this a bit. It's kind of don't really know anything else about the guy. How do you feel about him? Feel free to enlighten me, educate me. I don't concern myself much with the quote unquote historical individuals. I personally don't see a lot of utility in that. I care about the ideas, the systems, what their impact was,
How we doing,
um,
CX Rod?
how they improved or hurt the standard of living. And I seek to draw from that to conceive of a scheme that we can employ on a societal level to create a more free and fair, equitable society. Everything else, I think, is just like trivia. Alrighty, chat. Without further ado, let's turn the music off before I get banned. TikTok, I'm looking at you, and let's do it.
IDK Broswatch says you would love Lenin, then he did all of that.
Word. Might cop a
How
book
we
about
doing,
him then.
Dark?
Okay.
My name is Johnny Thompson. I'm a writer, I'm a columnist at Big Think, and I run the Mini Philosophy social network where I explain philosophical ideas to millions of people. I'm the author of the upcoming book, The Art of Enough, where I explain Epicureanism and teach everybody how it can apply to our lives.
Buckle in, chat. We're going to learn. Imagine that. Holy crap.
Chapter 1: Stupidity versus Evil.
So Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a 20th century philosopher and theologian, and he's
Pardon me, I haven't eaten yet, so you might have to suffer the sight of me consuming this meal.
known for his writings, but also he's known for his resistance to the Nazi system. He was born in the early 20th century to a prominent, quite elite family. His father was head of psychiatry at Berlin University, one of the most prestigious chairs in the country. When the Nazis came to power and began the German Christian movement, where they tried to co-opt the Protestant churches, he ran a counter-movement known as the Confessional Church. When the war broke out, Bonhoeffer was part of the anti-Nazi intelligence, where he would feed information to the Allies and to the resistance movements all over Europe and in Germany. Eventually, the Nazis found out about this, and he was imprisoned in 1943, where he wrote a whole range of letters and diaries, from which we get these notes on stupidity, which I'm going to talk about today. He was associated with the plot to kill Hitler in 1944, and he was executed at Flossenburg concentration camp in 1945, a few weeks before it was liberated by the Allies.
Hi, Mark here from Sandy Hook Promise. I know the pain of losing a child to gun violence, and that's why
You're
I'm
right,
so
Mark.
concerned by recently proposed permitless carry laws, which would
We'll
allow
watch
people
Mark's
to
ad.
carry a firearm in public without a permit or any training. This would even allow firearm owners who have never had a background check to carry a weapon on school grounds. I'm doing everything in my power to make sure other families don't know the pain of losing a child in a school shooting. That's why I need your help. Please sign the petition and demand Congress stop the permitless carry of weapons on school grounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
So in Bonhoeffer's letters, he talks about stupidity, and he makes this slightly bold claim that stupidity is a greater threat to civilization than even evil. But to understand that, we need to really understand what he meant by stupidity, because it's different to how a lot of us use the word stupid in our everyday lexicon. So what
we doing,
is stupidity?
hairless dog?
Well, it is not the same as foolishness. Foolishness is when you do something silly, reckless, imprudent. For example, if you put diesel into a
How we
petrol
doing,
car,
Wyatt Brinley?
or I, for example, put washing up liquid in the washing machine and it caused a disaster. Or I remember at my son's last birthday party, he was gifted a plastic golf set. And so I was desperate to impress all of the other mums and dads. And so I got the golf club out and I whacked the ball as hard as I could, and it went flying over our gate into the road outside, hitting a passing car. That is an example of foolishness, but it is not stupidity in the Bonhoeffer sense. Nor is it the same as a lack of cognitive ability. So sometimes in life you will run up against tasks which are simple.
So I think that point there deserves some discussion, and you'll get into it more. But oftentimes, when we engage with people who seem to reject basic sort of reality, or at least the best means we have of discerning reality, we tend to think of them as lacking some cognitive ability. But this isn't the case. And how do we know this? There are a ton of people of every level of education, from meager education to doctorate level education, who fall into stupidity. Just think about your average Trump supporter. Oh my God, George, you're being so partisan. You're being a hacker, whatever. There are Trump supporters who are highly educated and are not necessarily financially tied to the grift, and still support this administration because they have succumbed to what we will come to understand as stupidity. Let's continue.
Simply beyond what you are capable of. In my own case, for example, I find flat pack incredibly difficult. So if it comes to assembling any furniture or even fiddly things like doing Lego, I'll often pass it on to somebody else. Even my 5-year-old son is better at making Lego than I am. But nor is stupidity the same as ignorance, because If you don't know something, that is either a lack of education or a lack of exposure to that fact. For example, if you don't know the capital of Indonesia, that is an example of ignorance. And then you go away and you find out that the capital is it Jakarta? I think it might be the capital, it might be Jakarta. And that resolves your ignorance. That is not stupidity. So Bonhoeffer is careful to say that those three things are not stupidity. But what is stupidity? Now, again, Bonhoeffer says that stupidity can be defined by three different elements. The first is when we outsource our critical thinking to some kind of third party. It might be a teacher, it might be a parent, it might be a social media influencer, or it might be technology.
Oh my God, I love this part. Okay. Wait, hold on. I want to keep that graphic on the screen. Outsourcing our critical thinking to a third party. I think for me, this is the most crucial aspect of this concept because I think it's the most prominent. Far too often, we do exactly what this says: outsource our critical thinking to a third party. Typically, in American society, and I think most societies around the world, this happens via people giving up their critical thinking to a religious figure, a charismatic political leader, their favorite pundit. There are some people who do it with me on the stream where folks will come into the stream and they'll ask me questions they are perfectly capable of conceiving of. And the same tools I have at my disposal are at theirs, and they can sort of work out these things for themselves, but they outsource these questions to me. You see it across the political spectrum, across the educational spectrum, across societies where this is a phenomenon where people outsource their critical thinking, and in doing so outsource their agency, their intellectual agency, to someone else, be it an entity, be it a third party. I was on the train a couple months ago and I overheard these two Harvard guys talking about their this course they were taking, and one asked the other a question, and the other guy didn't really seem to have an answer for it. And in response, he said, "Just trust the text." And that struck me as concerning, because here this person was outsourcing their critical thinking to a third party. Now, the third party doesn't always have to be a human being, and we are seeing this with AI, where people are outsourcing their critical thinking to a third party. Now, I think it's fine to outsource your thinking when it comes to like mundane tasks that don't in any way enrich or engage your mind to AI. Go for it. But these more critical things, I think, it's worth our while to grapple with. Even if we fall flat on our face, the attempt helps to engage our mind and improve our mind. But this, I think, is the most prominent example of these sort of core tenets of stupidity that the
How we doing Slee.
the host here will get into, is people outsourcing their critical thinking to a third party, be it an entity like a book, a some other sort of text, a religious figure, a political pundit, a political figure, a regional leader, whoever, a historical figure. Far too often, people outsource their thinking to a third party. And this is why I have an issue, or this is why, to Andrew's last point, this is why I do not concern myself with the individuals in history, but rather their concepts. And I evaluate their ideas and the concepts that they push forward on the basis of how it helps to improve people's lives and where it fails to do so. And I take bits and pieces that I find helpful. And that's the only thing I concern myself with. I don't concern myself with like putting these individuals on a pedestal as to think this person is the sort of guru, or we are reacting. Are you reacting to videos now? I am. Victor. We're reacting to three elements of stupidity according to philosophy by Big Think. And again, far too often we fall victim to these things. So keep that in mind and try not to do so.
Source our critical thinking to some kind of third party. It might be a teacher, it might be a parent, it might be a social media influencer, or it might be technology.
Oh, another example, and then we'll move on from this. I remember it's like my freshman year of high school, I was dating this girl and we were talking about religion. And I was asking her questions that I've been having about religion at the time. And she says something that's always stuck with me. I kind of rattled off a couple questions, and her response was, and most people hold this sentiment. She said, I try not to think about it. I just go to church and trust what the priest says. Outsourcing our critical thinking to a third party. Outsourcing our intellectual agency to a third party. And in so doing, forgoing our political power, our personal power, forgoing our ability to lead ourselves, to be in charge of our growth and our development.
And of course, today, a lot of people do
Our
outsource
actions.
their thinking to technology. In 2014, a philosopher called Robert Howell wrote a paper where he introduced a thought experiment known as Google Morals. And in the paper, he explains that we often use apps to do certain things for us. The most common is Google Maps. So even coming here today, for example, I use Google Maps to tell me where to go. I followed the blue line. It told me to go left. It told me to go right. And hey, presto, here I am. And most people are okay with using Google Maps, even if we use it for slightly imbecilic things. So, for example, if I want to go to Big Ben, and it's obviously there in front of me, people will still use Google Maps to tell them where to go to Big Ben in London. But we're okay with that because navigation seems to be a thing that we're quite willing to outsource to technology. But Howell introduced an extra idea. He said, imagine that the future contains an app called Google Morals. Now, Google Morals is an app where you would type in a question and it tells you what you should do in any situation. So let's suppose I go to a burger bar or a burger restaurant and I say,
People are using AI for this very experiment that this person is talking about. People are using AI for this very purpose.
is it right for me to eat the meat burger or the halloumi burger? And the app does its whirring and it tells me, okay, you should do this. Now, the point isn't whether the Google Morals does the reasoning properly or not. The point that Robert Howell is saying is that we shouldn't be outsourcing our moral reasoning to an app. Now, this was written in 2014, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to point out the fact that a lot of people use ChatGPT and Claude and AI today to answer these kind of questions.
As I've said a million times, I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not a brain surgeon. I don't consider myself a particularly smart person. It's more about a intellectually honest and courageous desire to understand the world around me. That's what it's about.
Questions for them. Now, this was written in 2014, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to point out the fact that a lot of people use ChatGPT and Claude and AI today to answer these kind of questions for them. Is it right to do X? Is it right to do Y? Should I cheat on my partner? Should I stay with my partner? Should I do this job or should I do that job? We are using AI to do the critical thinking for us, and that's an example of what Bonhoeffer would call stupidity.
Hey, I'm Daniel, founder of Ridge, and every year we do something kind of crazy.
All right, Daniel, relax.
Of stupidity is when we are willfully ignorant. I mentioned earlier how ignorance is itself not a form of stupidity, but if you are continuously ignorant and you don't take any steps to resolve your ignorance, well, that is an example of stupidity.
So I think we're starting to paint a clear picture here. That it's no exaggeration to say that most of the society, by the philosophical definition of stupidity, is indeed stupid. outsourcing our critical thinking to a third party. Willful
Who are we
ignorance.
doing Black Boy of the Year?
Far too often, we have a wondering, a question, a gap in our knowledge. And even though we're in the information age and we have these tools at our disposal to get at information and learn like never before in the history of the species, people will not do so. People simply won't. Now, there are people who will, like people there. You have people who will Google everything and go into a rabbit hole and start with Wikipedia and then go to the wiki sources and find the primary source and try to elucidate what they're engaging with and like understand it and get to the heart of it. There are people who will do that, but they are not the norm. They are not the sort of rule. They are the exception. Most of us, I wonder why that is. Moving on. Oh, I heard this thing that I'm kind of skeptical about. Well, moving on. Oh, my upbringing, my lived experience, my biases say that this thing isn't true or it makes me uncomfortable, but I don't really understand it. Moving on. Willful ignorance. We refuse, it seems, on a societal level, as a rule, to use the tools at our disposal to learn about the world around us. Rather, we choose to stay in willful ignorance. We choose to stay in our comfort zones. We choose to stay in whatever dominant sentiments exist within our social groups and circles.
There is an example
We engage in stupidity.
in the ancient Greek world where the Oracle of Delphi was once reputed to say that the wisest man in the ancient world was Socrates. Socrates famously said that the only thing I know is that I know nothing at all, which is an example of ignorance. But the reason why he wasn't stupid was that because he spent his life devoted to trying to resolve that. In his works, The Nicomachean Ethics and the Politics, Aristotle says that one of the worst things that can befall any society is what the ancient Greeks called amathia. Now, amathia is willful ignorance. It's when somebody celebrates the fact they don't know something and they take no steps to resolve it.
Back to willful ignorance. I saw this clip. It was Joe Rogan. It was Mark Zuckerberg being interviewed by Joe Rogan. There are only so many times Rogan has interviewed Zuck. You can find this yourself and watch it. Rogan is asking Zuck about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I think Meta was subpoenaed and Zuckerberg had to ask or answer some questions per the subpoena. And Zuck is in his everyman phase. He's presented himself to the people as this everyman, as this regular guy, right? As this masquerading as a working class person as to seem less like a technocrat overlord. And he said something that just floored me. He said, I don't even know what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is. They're asking me all these questions and I don't even know what they're talking about. And Rogan is like, yeah, who even knows what that is? Because Rogan is an actual idiot. But Zuckerberg there was appealing to this sort of almost celebrated thing in our society of willful ignorance, right? Where we kind of celebrate like, oh, I don't know, that's above my pay grade, or I just like don't ask questions and keep my head in the sand. Or like you come across and hear these sentiments where people sort of act as though it's a virtue to be ignorant. And here was Mark Zuckerberg, the owner and head of one of the most powerful institutions on the face of the planet, one of the wealthiest person in the history of humanity, whose interests are tied to knowing these things, as he sits atop this organization, claiming he doesn't even know what this regulatory body is, and the host falls for it. And I was like, dude, the amount of stupidity, again, in the philosophical sense, where you simply have to devote yourself to ignorance. If you believe for a second, one, that Zuckerberg, given his position, doesn't know what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is, are you kidding me? And of course, Rogan doesn't press him on that because Rogan fucking cucks for the rich and powerful. But also, Zuckerberg knew that that playing this card would work, and that's why he played it, and it did work. And so Rogan moved on to another topic.
And in the ancient world, we can trace a line from Socrates to Plato to the Stoics, which associates knowledge with immorality and being wrong. The idea was that the more you know, the better you become. And so amathia is the great curse. It's a great contagion because there is this rise in people who no longer want to know things. They celebrate the fact they don't know things. And there's a kind of inverse elitism where those who do know things are mocked and ridiculed. So that's the second example of stupidity.
How often have you in your life seen that? People being mocked for knowing things. Nerd. Oh, bro, like, who do you think you are? Einstein, Plato, Socrates, Bro's over here thinking, just literally celebrating ignorance and mocking people for daring to try and understand the world around them. Celebrating stupidity. I mean, it's insane, but we've all experienced it. We continuously experience it. And it's a detriment to the very fabric of society, to your very being as a human.
According to Bonhoeffer. Now, the third element of stupidity is conformity. And this is what Bonhoeffer saw from his prison cell in 1943. He saw people who he grew up with, people who were educated in the same university systems, people who went to the same schools as him, and suddenly they became part of this Nazi operation. And so with conformity, it reminds me of something that Nietzsche says in his work Beyond Good and Evil. In his work Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche has an entire chapter devoted to truth. And in the work, Nietzsche argues that philosophers and academics and writers often become obsessed with this idea of truth, that truth has a value in and of itself. And he says, if you look at the history of humanity, if you look at where we are today, people don't care about truth as a thing. What matters more is loyalty, and what matters more is identity. So, for example, in 2022, a philosopher called Chris Rinaldi wrote a paper about indoctrination. And he was trying to answer the question, what is it that makes somebody indoctrinated? How can we define indoctrination? And Rinaldi argues that indoctrination is not defined by believing one thing or believing another thing. It's when you close your citadel to any alternative positions. It's when you associate your belief with an identity. You are that belief.
Are we starting to see a chat? Are the examples popping up in your head throughout society? I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. I'm a leftist. I'm a communist. I'm a socialist. These beliefs become who we are. We conform to what they prescribe, no longer engaging with them critically and examining them on their merits, how they can improve our lives, the standard of living of society, but rather simply pushing them forward as its champion. We turn off our ability to critically think. Now we outsource our critical thinking to this philosophy, to this idea, to this group identity and we conform. The identities become us.
And so you see any rivals to that position,
or the beliefs become us. The beliefs become our identity.
as a kind of test of alternative positions. It's when you associate your belief with an identity. You are that belief. And so you see any rivals to that position as a kind of test of faith. You see any rivals as a kind of temptation. So the indoctrinated person doesn't belong to any one camp. It's not the atheist, it's not the believer, it's not the right wing, or it's not the left wing. It's how you keep those beliefs.
I knew this video was going to slap. It's how you keep the beliefs. I think oftentimes leftists in particular, because, I mean, all on every side of the political spectrum, there are these sort of self-righteous individuals. But I think I've seen it, maybe it's because I talk to more leftist people or consume content that would fit in that category. But there's this sort of air of righteousness, this sort of air of having figured it out, and being sort of above the crust, such that they don't need to learn anything more. They don't need to continue to examine and sort of expand and improve and look at critically the ways they think, but rather they simply need to push their ideas. And there are some leftists who don't fall into this trap. And I think part of that is where you get this thing that people on the left will often talk about. Well, the left is too busy, or leftists are too busy arguing with each other to do anything. Well, in any healthy political situation, there would be that kind of discourse. There will be those debates and discussions, and those examining of ideas, and those challenging of ideas and direction. And you have people who simply want to turn that off, simply won't engage with that, who are more concerned with their belonging in this space and to this thing above anything else. And so whatever the political belief they hold, be it left, right, middle, whatever, they're not examining it critically. They are simply holding it as a part of themselves. And you'll come across people like this everywhere. You could throw a stone 2 feet over there and you'll hit somebody who is like this. In my personal experience, liberals are the ones, and again, everyone is like this, but I am surrounded by liberals more than not. There are a lot of liberals like this. A lot of people on the right, a lot of people everywhere. And it's just this sort of air of like, I figured it out, this is right, and I'm just going to go with it.
And what Renali is saying is what Bonhoeffer was saying as well, that when we conform to some kind of groupthink, we are surrendering our own ability to do critical thinking. And
right? They're coming into this political philosophy isn't the result of critical examination, but rather that they have conformed to whatever the dominant sort of political thought is wherever they are. So yeah, it comes as no surprise that you grew up in, I don't know, Portland, Oregon, and you're quote unquote liberal, or you grew up in somewhere in Texas and you're quote unquote conservative or a Republican. Yeah, because you conformed to the dominant sentiment where you were socialized.
and we are offloading it to somebody else to do for us. A writer and a philosopher called Robert Musil developed a distinction between what he called ordinary stupidity and intelligent stupidity. Now, ordinary stupidity is what a lot of people might associate with cognitive ability. Some people just can't do certain things. I can't do flat pack very well. But intelligent stupidity is when somebody who is otherwise incredibly able, somebody who is otherwise incredibly talented, articulate, erudite, uses their abilities for some foolish end. And what Musil and Bonhoeffer were writing about and what they were talking about was, of course, Nazism. Here you had a system that was populated by intelligent people, and yet they were using their abilities for an incredibly foolish end. So the reason why Bonhoeffer says that stupidity is a greater problem than evil is because with evil, you have a known problem. There is some intention to the malice. So when you have the evil person, we're thinking the Dark Lord Sauron from Lord of the Rings, dressed in black with orcs and fiery volcanoes. That's obviously evil. But likewise, in our world, we have people like who are serial killers or genocidal tyrants or people who we know to be evil. And when you can point at something which is evil, what happens is that the good of the world can rally round and they can resist the evil. Bonhoeffer's got this quotation where he says that evil contains within it the germ of its own subversion. Because once you know something is evil, the good people of Minas Tirith can gather round and they can fight the Dark Lord Sauron. But there are two problems with stupidity. The first is that as a society, we are much more tolerant of it. If somebody says they don't know something and they don't want to take steps to know that thing, we kind of brush it off. We say, oh, that's what they're like, and we kind of accept that. But the second problem with stupidity is that it's far harder to identify. So, for example, not everything is the Dark Lord Sauron. Not everybody is a serial killer. Not everybody is a genocidal tyrant. But in our time, of course, we have real-life evil people. For example, I'm thinking in the UK, we had the Jimmy Savile scandal. In 2012, Jimmy Savile was exposed as abusing children, and of course that is an evil. And the good of the world rallied round. The judicial system and the police and all of the witnesses came out and they opposed this very obvious, explicit evil. In 2017, you had Harvey Weinstein. Similar there, the good of the world rallied round, the judicial system worked, police came out, Harvey Weinstein was arrested, he is now in prison. And
Yeah, I think. Well, let's continue, and
very
I'll.
recently, you have the Epstein files. These are obvious evils, and in each case, you have somebody who is evil eventually being put into prison, or in the case of Savile, he was dead. But the question that comes after that is, who knew about what was going on? Who are the people who didn't ask questions? Who are the people who were willfully blind? Who are the people who were stupid in the Bonhoeffer sense? Because in the Nazi regime, there's a character called Albert Speer who embodies this quite well. Albert Speer was a very intelligent and educated person, and he was Hitler's architect. He ended up becoming the Minister for Munitions and Production in the Nazi system. And when it came to the end of the war and he was put on trial at the Nuremberg trials, he said he didn't know anything. He said he didn't know about the Holocaust, he didn't know about all of the trains, he didn't know about all of the evils of the Nazi machinery. And the people at Nuremberg said to him, this is ridiculous. You are an intelligent person. There is no possible way you didn't know what was going on. And so he was arrested and he was put in prison. He wasn't executed, like some of the Nazi regime were executed, but people said that you should have known better. Your stupidity in that instance was not an excuse. So that's why stupidity is such a harder thing to find, and it's why Bonhoeffer thinks it's actually worse than evil, because it's part.
So I actually don't think it's that hard to find. I think if we look at the sort of tenets of stupidity, or the pillars of stupidity that he presented at the beginning, you can kind of discern a stupid person from a not stupid person just by asking them a couple questions about the things they believe and seeing how they respond to your questions, discerning their thought process, how they hold these beliefs, and how they engage with you, right? It's not that hard. It's not that hard to discern someone who's engaging in stupidity and someone who's not. It kind of happens on their face. Oh, are they simply claiming something, or are they claiming something that is that's wrong but easily verifiable? That's stupidity. I'm saying something that is obviously wrong and I could find out that it's wrong like that, but I don't. That's stupidity. I am my sense of self is tied to this belief. That's stupidity. I am invoking authority as my sort of base or the basis for my argument, outsourcing my critical thinking to this entity. That's stupidity.
Part of the system, and it drags down institutions and it makes everybody far more corrupt and worse off. So there's a great quotation which has been floating around the internet for a very long time now, from the earlier days of the internet, and it says that debating an idiot is like playing chess with a pigeon. You can play as well as you want, but the pigeon will jump on the board, it'll crap on the pieces, and it'll go back to its flock declaring victory. And it's a brilliant quotation, and it's a brilliant visual because it is so true as to what it feels like when you are debating somebody who is stupid in the sense of Bonhoeffer. When you're debating somebody who is stupid in the sense of Bonhoeffer, they don't question their own beliefs and they are unwilling to accept any contrary position to what they actually believe. They're playing by different rules. You might approach them with facts and the most logical arguments you can possibly devise, but they will see you as an enemy. They will see you as an other. They will see you as a kind of temptation. And so it's very interesting that in our language, we often have a few examples where people will try to repel any contrary position using certain words. And these can belong to whatever different denomination or different ever belief system. So for example, if somebody says trust the science. Now, if we dig into what trust the science means, it makes sense. You go away and you look at some peer-reviewed papers. You look at what the consensus of the experts are saying. You look at some studies online, whatever. When someone says trust the science, it's often used as a kind of batting away of any opposition to you. Another example might be do your own research. Again, on paper, it looks like a good thing. Go away and Google and find out what's going on yourself. But if somebody says do your research, it's often used as a way to try to reduce you as an alternative position. So the reason why debating an idiot is so difficult is because they are playing by a different rule system. In Aristotle's rhetoric, he actually makes a distinction between three different types of persuading somebody, or three different ways that people often come to believe something. He talks about logos, which is rationality, it's reason, and it's using good debate and facts and evidence. He talks about ethos, which is somebody's character, their reputation, their status, and the ability to persuade you.
I remember in my freshman year of high school, before reading, bro, TikTok's literally not showing my stream. I use an account to monitor my stream, and on that account, you can't see the stream. What the actual fuck, dude? This is crazy.
How we doing, caveman?
Oh my god. It is what it is, man. Okay. So I learned about this freshman year of college or high school, and as we were learning about it, at the end of the unit, the final question that our teacher posed to us was, which of these do we think is the most effective means of persuading people? Now, I'm going to go back and let him start with logos, and then I'll give my answer, what I answered then, and I still think.
Rationality, it's reason, and it's using good debate and facts and evidence. He talks about ethos, which is somebody's character, their reputation, their status, and the ability to persuade you. And he talks about pathos, which is emotions. It talks about feelings. And Aristotle...
So, appealing to one's intellect, using sound reasoning, logic, backed by facts, appealing to authority, one's character, one's status, one's position, or using one's position to make that appeal, using one's authority to make that appeal, or appealing to one's emotions. Which do we think is the most effective? It's pathos or pathos. It's that. It's appealing to people's emotions. Obviously. Yes, it's appealing to people's emotions. The second most effective is making an appeal based on authority or status. The least effective is appealing to one's intelligence. You would think, since we're having a debate and or seeking to better understand something, that appealing to one's intellect and one's ability to reason would be what is the most effective. It is not, because people are not working from that point. They're not working from a place of intellectual understanding.
But ethos, which is somebody's character, their reputation, their status, and the ability to persuade you. And he talks about pathos, which is emotions. It talks about feelings. And Aristotle, even in the ancient Greek world, this is, the epitome of the rational philosopher. He is well aware that logos plays second place to your ethos and your pathos as well. So if we pull that up to the modern time, the same thing is at play here. That when you are debating somebody, you may think that you are both playing by logos. That if I lay out my argument in premises to conclusion, if I lay out all of the evidence, this person is going to bow to me and say, well done, you are so brilliant, your position is better, and I will believe what you are saying. And what Bonhoeffer is saying about the stupid person, the pigeon on the chessboard, is that they don't even care about the logos. They care about the ethos, they care about the pathos. And so you need to play it according to their game if you're going to have any kind of proper debate and discussion.
My grandmother is incredibly religious, and for the longest time, this is a hill I've been trying to climb since I was like 12 years old. Uh, she believes some really harmful
How are we
things.
doing, Alex?
She doesn't see them as harmful. They are harmful. Things that sort of dehumanize other people. And you think being a Christian would mean that one doesn't engage in no. Okay. So I would try to lay out intellectual appeals to her. None of those worked. And then I came to realize, and I still struggle with this because there's a stubborn part of me that refuses to not take an intellectual appeal approach, because I'm like, what are we doing here? But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, what ended up working, I'll give you a good example. She was really homophobic. She is less homophobic now, I would like to think, because of me. And I kept trying different ways of making this argument from a logos perspective about why I think she shouldn't be homophobic and why it's harmful, and why the things she's saying are homophobic and how homophobia is harmful. Nothing worked. And then I said, okay, because you are a Christian and you believe all these things, and these things are good and helpful, and try to raise people up and help people. By doing this, you are demeaning people, you are attacking people, and so I'm like trying to speak to the emotion of it. You are putting people down. I moved away from the logic and went to the emotion of it. And that eventually got her, because she didn't want to do this sort of emotional harm to people. And that's what it took. If I would have started that 4 years, 10 years before, it would have been there the entire time. But that wasn't the tree I was barking up. I was barking up the logic tree, and logic simply was not part of the chessboard. It was not welcomed.
Somebody in our heads. We offer them play it according to their game if you're going to have any kind of proper debate and discussion.
Hank,
So
what's
when
up,
we're
dude?
talking
How are
about
you doing,
stupidity,
Hank?
we often imagine somebody
Hank,
in our
what's going
heads.
on, brother?
We often imagine a certain type of person. It might be somebody in our own life. It might be somebody that we've met quite recently. But Nathan Ballantyne, who's a philosopher, he actually argues that stupidity can take many different forms and it can come from many different angles. And he talks about a particular phenomenon known as epistemic trespassing, which exists within academia. So the most intelligent, the most able, the most educated people you know can also be guilty of this intellectual stupidity. Ballantyne talks about domain specificity, which is where you know your area particularly well. So, for example, it might be that an astrophysicist is incredibly knowledgeable about stars, about black holes, about the movement of planets. But epistemic trespassing is when the astrophysics thinks that because they know so much about this one area, they will also be able to tell you about another area.
Yeah, so individuals engage in this, right? These quote unquote experts engage in this, but society also falls victim to this incredibly easily. There are people who, I mean, I remember growing up, and I'm going to use a lot of examples of a younger me who knew less about the world. Um, I always found it odd when something would happen that was either political or there was, everything is political, but some thing would occur and they'll have a celebrity on to give their opinion about it. I'd be like, who the hell is this? Why are we listening to George Clooney's or Tom Hanks' opinion of this thing? Who gives a fuck? Who cares? Who cares? They're good at pretending to be something else on TV. Why are we listening to them about this? Why are we listening to them about the war in Iraq? What's going on? But you see it all the time. Well, this person knows a lot about X, Y, and Z. This person knows a lot about I don't know, like they're an engineer. So yeah, they should give us their opinion on the migrant crisis. No, they should not. No, they should not. They should shut up and be like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Hence, why, chat? I only discuss social and political issues for as long as you can think, because that's what I studied and that's what I continue to educate myself about. Now, that's a broad topic, but that's what it is. I don't talk about anything else because I don't know about those things. It would be irresponsible to do so. You have all these grifters online and their imbecilic flock who are like, oh, well, tell me about insert literally any topic ever. And then they'll go on and start spewing out their pie holes, and people will be like, why do you think this person is qualified in any way, shape, or form to speak on these things? I didn't feel like having facial hair anymore. That's why. Also, this is not relevant to what we're discussing. And so this idea of this sort of expert bias or this kind of moving into another field and giving a perspective that isn't backed by anything or any expertise is, again, another phenomenon we see in society that plagues us. I went to Springfield College.
So epistemic trespassing, for example, is when the astrophysics thinks they know about political science. But it could be also when a car mechanic thinks they know about tree surgery. It could be when a doctor thinks they know about economics. Epistemic trespassing, according to Bannatyne, often has two causes. The first is what he...
How are we doing?
The sort of the intellectual class, if you will.
My number says, what was your major?
My major was sociology and political science and social justice. I majored in sociology. I minored in political science and social justice. I've lived in 3 societies. I've traveled to 13 countries. And I studied sociology and political science. So I talk about social and political issues. I continue to educate myself on social and political issues, and those are the things I discuss. Okay. This epistemic trespassing is something that the intelligentsia or the intellectual class, if you will, those whose labor is tied to their particular expertise in any given field, doctors, lawyers, professors, scientists, researchers, they are incredibly guilty of this. Now, obviously not all of them, but this is where I feel like this is the most prominent, where people get this idea of, well, I'm a smart person. I'm an intelligent person. Right here we see on the screen intellectual pride. He's going to get into this because this is where it's coming from. I take pride in my intellect, and so I and I hold myself in this high regard intellectually, and so why shouldn't I speak on this thing, though it is not in my field, and I do not study it. I can make some sound intellectual guesses, and it's one thing to speculate and to name it as such. We can all speculate until we're blue in the face. No harm done. But to speak as though there is greater sort of credence to your perspective because you have some intellectual backing in a particular space is stupidity. It's stupidity. It's engaging in stupidity. And obviously to treat that person doing that as though there is any merit to the things they're saying based off of their status in this intellectual space is also engaging in stupidity.
He calls intellectual pride. If you are at the top of your game and you've got all of these accolades, you've got all of this praise, you get these awards, you get this kind of body of students who are waiting on your every word, that's a kind of ego boost. It's a kind of encouragement. You get this intellectual pride from all of that. And so you therefore think that you can walk into different disciplines, different areas, and you can tell them what is true and what is false.
Creatine earned its reputation through decades.
Walk into different disciplines, different areas, and you can tell them what is true and what is false. And the second problem is an overestimation of what is called transferable skills. So transferable skills are things that will apply across a whole range of disciplines. So at a basic level, the ability to read is a transferable skill. The astrophysicist can read, the economist can read, the neuroscientist can read, the tree surgeon can all read. These are all transferable skills, but also writing an essay is a transferable skill. The ability to analyze data is a transferable skill. So Bannatyne argues that epistemic trespassers are often guilty of overestimating their own transferable skills. They assume that just because they can analyze data in one area, that they can analyze data in another area without considering the wider knowledge that is required to make sense of that data set.
Oh man, this is, dude, bravo to this. I thought I was already subscribed to Big Think. Chad, if you're not subscribed to Big Think, go ahead and do so. I think, it's worth it. I think I'm subscribed on my other YouTube. Yeah, we're all guilty of this to a degree. Intelligentsia, I think, is the most guilty of it. But I think the crucial point there for me is that we ignore the sort of prerequisites of being able to substantially engage with a thing, right? For me to understand economics, I need a basis of economic knowledge. I cannot simply go into there thinking that, oh, well, I studied sociology and so I can understand economics. I can get into this and I can figure it out. Now, that's not to say that's not true. But I need to do the work of building that base knowledge first before I should, or before it would be responsible of me to speak to this thing. But that's not what's happening here. Rather, people assume and overestimate their transferable skills.
So what Bannatyne is saying is that stupidity isn't limited to any one particular type of person. It can be anywhere. It can be in the academy. It can be an incredibly intelligent person who steps outside of their lane.
And everyone won't be engaging in stupidity the same way. They won't be displaying every and all aspects of stupidity that's been covered so far. Maybe just one or two, maybe just one. But it's everywhere. It's not, folks might think MAGA, stupid, or liberals, libtards, whatever. It's not, what's the word I'm looking for? Mutually exclusive to any political ideology, any region, anything, any social identity, nothing. It's simply a phenomenon that happens. with human beings and how we engage with our understanding of the world and our intellectual capacity.
So Chris Rinaldi in 2022 wrote a paper into indoctrination, and he was trying to look at the factors that make somebody indoctrinated. And he is quite clear early on in his paper to make the distinction that anybody can become indoctrinated. It doesn't matter whether you are a Christian or an atheist or left-wing or right-wing or a meat eater or a vegan, whatever. Anyone can become indoctrinated insofar as how they hold their beliefs. Now, the difference is that the indoctrinated person will see every rival to their belief system as a kind of enemy. They are so used to associating their belief with a certain identity that if anybody comes along and challenges that belief, they will see them as a kind of...
This is why I keep telling like people on the left to engage with my content. It's not a club. It's not a club. It's not an identity. It's not a badge. It's not something you wear. They're just groups of ideas for the purpose of creating a freer and fairer society. It's not your identity. It's not who you are. It's not some club. There's no us and them. These are just ideas to a particular end. That's it. That's it. Stop conflating your sense of self with these things. Now, I know that might sound radical because it's like, what do you mean? This is who I am? No, it's not who you are. These are ideas to a particular end, and you should only hold them insofar as they have utility to that end. And only in that capacity that they have utility to that end. Anything else, it's not you. It's not you. It's not your identity. It's not some club. It's not some stand-in for social belonging or connection. No. Now, is that to say that you can't build social connections based off exploring these things? No. But that should not be sort of how you identify yourself as a human being.
For example, in the online discourse, it's very common to attack what's called mainstream media. Now, there is a certain brand of conspiracy theory which will say that if any evidence, any article, any position is presented to them from the mainstream media, well, the mainstream media are the enemy. They'll immediately discount this information. They'll immediately discount this article because it was written by a certain person, by a certain outlet, by a certain publication. That's an example of what Rinaldi would call indoctrination. They are so used to viewing the enemy in certain areas that they will not take anything.
Yeah, so you see this all the time in American politics. Oh, this is a MAGA person saying this. This is a conservative political commentator saying it, so it can't be true. Without engaging with the substance of what is being argued, or this is a left-wing liberal Democrat person, whatever, saying it, so it can't be true. I think Tucker Carlson is one of the most repulsive people on the planet. There are a lot of things he says that I agree with when I examine them on their substance. That doesn't make me think he's any less abhorrent. But I don't need to put everything he says behind this wall that says, no, it has to be bad because I don't like Tucker Carlson. No. Because then I'm engaging in stupidity. I'm no longer engaging critically. I'm not looking at the substance and merits of what he's saying or what they're saying or whatever. Now, it doesn't happen very often because he's a grifter. He's a chameleon. He'll just say things to gain some sort of prominence in whatever space he's in. But nevertheless, I need always be engaging with the substance of what's being said and not with my feelings about the individual, my feelings about the group they associate with. or any prior experiences. Now, I'm not saying this is easy because as human beings, we have these biases. And this is why this is a phenomenon in human society, because our brains seem to have a tendency to these things, but it's not sort of beyond our ability to grapple with and triumph over.
Thing that they say as worth considering. Now, that's the first part of Rinaldi's paper, but the second part of Rinaldi's paper asks the slightly more difficult question: how can we resolve this? Because if we are aware of indoctrinated people in our lives, and we have to be aware that we also ourselves might be indoctrinated in certain key areas, I suspect that most people watching this, and myself included, are indoctrinated in certain areas, that I will reject
Naturally.
information, I will reject evidence if it's presented to me by a certain person in a certain way, or
We are all susceptible to it. We are all susceptible to it. Never put yourself in this special category. We're all susceptible to propaganda. We are all susceptible to indoctrination. We are all susceptible to all of the isms under the sun. You're not special. I am not special. Get that out of your head. We are all susceptible to it. No matter how much education you have, no matter how much you've read, none of that. You are susceptible to it. You have to constantly be ever vigilant in this task and try and work. It's exhausting work, but you have to do it. You have to do it. And take your pride and ego out of it.
about a certain topic. And so Rinaldi is asking, how can we resolve that? And the clearest example is to give a kind of off-ramp. Because challenging your beliefs is difficult. And challenging your beliefs is very difficult when you associate those beliefs with a certain identity. And so you need to create an environment where criticizing a belief or doubting a belief is considered to be safe. Now, this is where we have to lean on our friend Aristotle again, because in this case, logos will only get us so far. Rationality, logic, laying out evidence will only take you up to the door, but to go through the door, you need to have a certain ethos, you need to have a certain character, you need to have a certain warmth of personality. And so when we're discussing ideas with somebody, we should always bear in mind how important it is to have that kind of warmth, to develop a relationship with someone where you can criticize or discuss these ideas in an open way without it feeling confrontational.
In Albion, no matter where you
Yeah,
go,
I struggle as hell with that. I find myself easily able to do that when it's somebody I have a long-standing intimate relationship with. And I mean intimate in the platonic sense. Short of that, I'm like, I just have little patience. I have little patience. Or I'm able to do that when the stakes are incredibly high. If the stakes are high, I'm able to do it. So I know it's the most effective approach, but for me, it takes a lot out of me. And I also don't feel any sort of obligation to those people. But I need to get over that. I need to get over that. And I've been trying. Actually, I was talking to Shannon about this, speaking with Shannon about this today, about working to engage differently online and not be so aggressive or so confrontational. I don't even want to say aggressive, but confrontational. Like when I discuss or debate or talk to people online, I am looking to completely unravel. If they say something that I feel like is stupid or is uninformed, I am looking to dissect the thing they're saying and completely rip it apart. And if somebody holds this thing as part of who they are, that's always going to come off as an attack. And, you know, even if one was to engage in a way that was more sort of amicable, it might not matter. And typically it doesn't, honestly. But you're better off engaging in a way that is amicable, as opposed to from this confrontational standpoint. Obviously, that's gonna beget worse results. And I think it kind of, there's a sort of emotional maturity there that is required for that, and a a sort of understanding of human beings as we are. No one wants to be attacked. No one wants to feel attacked. But goddamn it, is it exhausting? Especially when I'm like, brother, you could just pull out the phone you're typing this nonsense on and look up and see that it's nonsense. But see, there I go again. There I go.
Particularly when it's associated with ignorance, or discuss these ideas in an
Okay, so chat, I think we're actually going to end this here because it's late and I don't have another like hour to get through the end of this. But if you're interested in watching the rest of it, we might I might cover it on the next Reaction Tuesday, but probably not, honestly. Because I think we've kind of gotten the gist, hopefully. The title of the clip, again, is The Three Elements of Stupidity According to Philosophy, featuring Johnny Thompson. And the YouTube channel is Big Think. And there you go. There you have it. Any questions, any thoughts, any arguments, wonderings? Yeah, brother, you got it. Thanks for hanging in there, man. Thanks for caring. Thanks for caring about engaging your mind and our society, because I think we all should. And I want to leave chat with this. We are all susceptible to these things. None of us are above stupidity. None of us are above propaganda. None of us are above indoctrination. None of us are above internalizing these isms and perpetuating these isms. We need to build the tools and discernment continuously and always be critically analyzing what we are receiving, how we are thinking about what we are receiving, and always be open and even sort of suspicious that we are wrong or that there's a possibility that we are wrong. And so everything we know should always be the best of our understanding. The best of our understanding. Everything I know is the best of my understanding. I don't know any truths. I'm not omnipotent. I'm not infallible. Everything I know is the best of my understanding. And I'm ever open to improving that understanding. And if I hold something as a belief, as an understanding, and I'm presented with arguments, information, knowledge that refutes that understanding, I let it go. That refutes that belief, I let it go. I let it go. It no longer serves me. It no longer serves me. That's what I want to leave you with. I hope y'all have a good night. I hope you have a good rest of your week. I'll catch y'all Thursday. We'll be playing some games, getting back to the regularly scheduled program to kind of reiterate what the schedule has been and will be going forward. On Sundays, we'll be doing community game Sundays where we play games with people in the community. All you have to do is drop a follow and join the Discord. On Tuesdays, we'll be doing reactions like this. And on Thursdays, we'll be doing gaming with social and political commentary. And that's the schedule moving forward. Thanks again,
Gomez?
and y'all take care. Let's listen to some outro music, chat. What's up, Gomez? How we doing, brother? Gomez, appreciate the gifts, man. You've been coming in here dropping a ton of gifts, dude. I really appreciate it. Every cent, every anything comes, dude. You just showing up makes a huge difference. Nothing makes me more happy than seeing people who show up regularly show up. Even if there are weeks in between, months in between, just people coming back. Hey man, I appreciate that. The feeling is mutual, brother. Thank you. Thank you. The feeling is mutual. CJ, what's up, brother? How we doing? We're just kind of ending the program here, doing some outro music before we call it. So we'll keep it running for another 3 minutes or so. But I hope you boys are doing well. Hope hope your nervous system is regulated because I think we underestimate how important that is for our ability to feel safe within our own bodies, to engage with the world in a way that doesn't make us feel like we're being attacked. I hope your nervous system is regulated. And if it's not, work on that. It is incredibly important. I myself am working on that. Um, and yeah, man, what's going on? This is since you've been gone. It's being covered by a day to remember. YouTube, baby, YouTube, man. Take care, R. Take care, Gomez. What's the R for? What's the R for? Because I'm assuming your last name is Gomez. What's the R for? Robert. Do you go by Robert or Rob? Oh, this was here the whole time. I should have moved that. What are you gonna do? Rob, got you, brother. Since you've been gone, I can't breathe for the first time. Oh yeah, that was last Monday. We had a golf tournament fundraiser, and I did a couple auctions. Sometimes I would do like a keynote speech and the auction. This time I just did the auction because we had our district partners giving the keynote, which I thought was awesome, right? Seeing the people who are on the ground doing the work speak to the experience, I think it's huge. Um, but yeah, raise a ton of money for a good cause. I think, like I said in the post, it's necessary that we discuss and talk about these issues. And we also need to be taking action in any way we can, in any small way, in any big way, whatever we can do, even if that's just being nice to your neighbor or smiling at the person walking across the street, saying hello, helping somebody carry their groceries, holding the door open, giving someone the benefit of the doubt, whatever we can do to bring more humanity into this world that seems to be so devoid of it. Because what else are we doing here? What else are we doing here? We're saying
How are
what's
we
up to
doing
your
tea?
favorite TikToker. That also counts. All right, guys. That was our outro song. Damn, I love this song too. I mean, if I go by that logic, we'll be here all day because it's one of my favorite playlists. This is right here by the story so far. So much more to talk about. Would I ever run for president? Yeah, why not? Though I don't know if I believe in the presidential system. I mean, there are ways to tweak it to make it democratic, but as it exists, it is an undemocratic institution. The entire U.S. political system is an undemocratic institution. We need to democratize the society, decentralize power so that working class people, everyday people have decision making power, have a say in how things are ran and how things are done, and don't just have to be subjected to the desires and whims of these people who lord atop us. Don't even care at all. When I don't even care at all. Story so far is fire. So stay right here, right now. There's so much more to talk